Now that Baldur's Gate 3 has been out for a while, I feel like I know the game enough to make a top 10 list of things that are different between this game and the tabletop RPG game, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A lot of optimization knowledge can be used here, but some things have been dramatically changed. That's what we're going to talk about today. In the future, I'll give some build advice, so stay tuned for that. Welcome to Pack Tactics. Quick introduction, I'm just a kobold who makes optimization content for D&D. I've been doing it for years. I break down the math, I talk about combos, I read the books to people, I do all sorts of stuff. Anyway, starting off with number 10, Surprise. To be honest, it was kind of hard to rank these because there's a lot of changes. Like, all of these changes have a massive impact on the game that just changes the optimization field dramatically. And Surprise, which is the strongest thing in the entire game, is at the bottom of the list. My friends over at Tabletop Builds has an entire guide on how stealth and surprise works in D&D 5e, which I'll link down below. But to summarize, your party rolls stealth against the enemies, and if the lowest roll among your party is lower than the passive perception of enemies, you fail your attempt at surprising those enemies. Otherwise, you succeed and the enemies who are not perceptive enough are surprised. Either way, initiative is rolled for all combatants. If someone is surprised, they do not act until after their first turn. The inability to act basically works the same way in Baldur's Gate 3, with the caveat of them being able to call out to others to join the initiative, at which point they won't be surprised. However, hiding and the initiating of combat, and therefore surprise, works quite differently in Baldur's Gate 3. One person being hidden from the enemies can initiate combat to surprise all enemies. You can do this by hiding and, for example, attacking them. After this point, anyone else from your party can join in after surprise is guaranteed through the actions of one person. That person did lose out on whatever action or bonus action they used and cannot use it again during combat. But this is fine. It's the same amount of actions you would get in 5e. Getting surprise in this game is super easy compared to 5e, although it's easy in 5e as well. But here it's just avoid the cones and shoot from range. In D&D 5e, it's group stealth rolls, and of course the DM. Next up, number 9, surfaces. Baldur's Gate makes use of surfaces a lot, all of which have unique effects when stepping on them. All of them seem to be hard-coded at a DC of 12. I originally thought it was a bug, but after seeing patch 1, well, maybe not. Anyways, both spells as well as other features can use these surfaces in some way. The web spell, for example, creates an area with the web surface. Create water can make an area into a wet surface. Different surfaces lead to different conditions, which can cause things like vulnerability to lightning, taking tick damage, and more. It would take a long time going through all the surfaces, but know that, for example, the wet condition can be combined very well with a lot of other abilities. And these surfaces can be really strong. However, it's important to understand that you can only have one surface somewhere at a time. If you cast web and fire is nearby, it'll turn into a fire surface. Water, a water surface. And so on. Even a character bleeding on web can remove web. This is really weird. It rarely happens, but it can happen. For number 8, I thought I would give you a treato because I is nice. This video is sponsored by Gilman's Guide to Speed. The guys over at Only Crits are making a sourcebook for 5e that takes your adventures up in the clouds. Immerse yourself in a speedy arcane punk world unlike no other. It's time to step on the gas with racing and vehicle creation mechanics. These rules cover the basics of creating a chassis and power unit without locking players into overly specific selections. They're designed to provide a framework of creation with enough freedom for creativity. There's also over 30 pre-made vehicles you can collect, new spells and magic items, 4 new classes, 12 new subclasses, feats, and over 40 new monsters. Holy moly! That's right, this book is full of Treatos, and it keeps getting bigger. The next stretch goal is these cool character sheets that will make you faster. Only Crits is the first to ever sponsor this channel, and I'm super excited to see their new book. I highly recommend checking out Gilman's Guide to Speed. There's only a week left to support them, so you better broom broom broom. Broom broom broom. Back to the video. Number 8, Rituals. Rituals in D&D 5e are spells of which the casting can be prolonged to gain the spell's benefits without it costing spell slots. Some rituals you might know of are Detect Magic and Identify. These two spells are not in Baldur's Gate, but they're kind of iconic in D&D, or at least I think so. Anyways, the ability to cast these spells as rituals in D&D 5e is exclusive to certain classes. And wizards are generally the best at them, as they do not even need to prepare the spells to cast them as rituals. This has been completely thrown out the window in Baldur's Gate 3. You do need to cast these spells out of combat and outside of turn-based mode if you want to cast them without expending spell slots. But everyone that has ritual spells can cast them as rituals. This is nice. Additionally, quite a lot of spells that weren't rituals in 5e are rituals in Baldur's Gate. Longstrider being a ritual is new, which increases the target's speed by 10 feet and lasts until your next long rest. You should definitely be casting this every day. Other spells are Featherfall, which now needs to be cast prior to falling and lasts 10 rounds. Speak with Dead is also now a ritual spell. And finally, Enhanced Sleep, which was called Jump in 5e, is a ritual and lasts 10 rounds. Jumping was also heavily changed, but I'll talk about that later. There's bound to be more spells out there that are now rituals, but I can't remember them on top of my head. But the ones that I just named, they're probably the best ones, so keep that in mind. The only loss for wizards, that is that they have to prepare these spells to cast them as rituals. And while you could swap them out after casting the spell's effects are immediately removed if you do so. Number 7, magic items. In 5e, magic items are kind of an enigma. Supposedly, the system is balanced to work without them, but in reality, this is not the case. Besides that, it's basically entirely up to Dungeon Master Fiat when you get them, where you get them, and what items you even get. Let's say you're playing a concept where you're the best sickle wielder in existence. Well, you're gonna have a hard time if all you get is flame tongue greatswords. Some dungeon masters out there are even afraid to give martials magic weapons at all. And if you play in games like that, and they absolutely exist by the way, your character might struggle unless you actually optimize to fix the problem. Like for example, Forge Cleric exists. They can turn weapons or armor into magical variants. And that comes with a cost, and you might not even afford it. 1, it takes a level. 2, there's a multi-classing prerequisite. And as we can see here, you need a minimum of 13 wisdom. Multi-classing prerequisite is not a thing in Baldur's Gate 3. I should have put that in the top 10 as well, but then I would have 11. So this is a side note. Anyways, back to magic items. In Baldur's Gate, this works differently. This is a video game. Loot in general seems to work in this way. Items found in chests and stuff are mixed between being predetermined and randomly rolled. Vendors seem to work similarly. However, you can exploit the vendors. When you long rest, level up a single character, or even respec your character, their inventories are then re-rolled. This means that you could buy a +1 hand crossbow at the Druid's Grove for every character. You just keep leveling up your character to re-roll the vendors. You can even pickpocket a lot of the NPCs and get your money back, or just steal the entire vendor's inventory. Enough about the vendors. Overall, you'll find magic items galore in this world, and a lot of options are opened up because of these varying and great effects. Mapping out magic items is a build in itself. and you'll probably never run out of these resources. Now, of course, you cannot entirely force the game to give you whatever you want, but it's a lot more reliable than your average 5e table. Though keep in mind, and this is really important, you cannot feed your computer pizza for greater loot. Number 6 is jumping! The way jumping works has basically been completely reworked. To summarize the way it works in 5e is that to get a good distance for your long or high jumps, you need a running start. If not, you don't really get all that far. Additionally, all the distance you traverse through with these jumps is deducted from your total movement pool, of which the total is your movement speed. So if you run 10 feet, jump 10 feet, and get over a chasm, you've spent 20 feet of movement. In Baldur's Gate 3, however, this works very differently. You don't need to have a running start at all, and all jumps cost 10 feet of movement instead of the distance you traveled. The jump distance is based on your strength in both games, but the math is a bit different. These buffs are particularly balanced by the fact that jumping costs a bonus action in Baldur's Gate, whereas in 5e it costs nothing. However, if you have no use of your bonus action and you want to get somewhere, you should basically always jump. Even if your strength is a dump stat, 15 feet is more than 10 feet.
Wait, what? Really?
Yeah, it gets even stronger together with enhanced leap. It triples your jumping speed. That's 45 feet of movement for the cost of 10. Jumping is really insane in this game. For me, this is like Phantom Steed level of silliness. Number 5 is resting. In 5e, rests are basically based on the danger you're in. You can take a lot of short rests in one day, but long rests require you to wait 8 hours, and things move around a lot in 5e. It's a living world. Short rest takes 1 hour, by the way. If we pretended this was 5e and I killed Priestess Gut here, and then long rested, be it outside or in this very room, chances are super high that the goblins in this dungeon will find out, and the whole place will be alerted in some way or another. They'll start to prepare for something. They might not know where you are or what exactly happened, but obviously they will take this seriously. Another thing is enemies might ambush your camp, and I've played in a lot of 5e games where even short rests might trigger random encounters. What I'm saying is even resting can be dangerous. Time can be against you. In Baldur's Gate, you can basically rest whenever you want. There is no punishment like that. The only thing you need to take into account is that you can only short rest twice per long rest. And you need food to long rest, which is really easy to get. Depending on how you play this game, you can get away with a lot of things, because you can just take a long rest after almost every fight. This makes the game really easy, even on the hardest difficulty. Personally, I want the game to be challenging, so I'm not spamming long rests every fight. I'm treating everything like it's a dungeon crawl in 5e. If you want to blow all your spell slots on smites and then long rest, you absolutely can. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a valid way to play the game, but in terms of difficulty, you have to understand that both D&D 5e and Baldur's Gate are both resource games. If you're low or out of resources in a dangerous fight, you will struggle. You might even die. Baldur's Gate, from what I know, will never challenge your resources like that. And let's not forget, you get a ton of magic items in this game, and that's even more resources. How many spell scrolls do you have in your inventory? You even start the game with having Revivify scrolls on tactical. That's a 3rd level spell right there. Most 5e players have never seen a Revivify scroll ever. They just prepare Revivify instead of crafting one. Anyways, we gotta move on. Number 4, we have Invisibility and Darkness effects. This technically falls under changes to spellcasting, which comes up later, but I felt it was different enough to be mentioned now. In 5e, being unable to see someone makes your attacks all at disadvantage. If the enemy can't see you either, then you get advantage. If you have advantage and a disadvantage, then it just becomes a straight roll instead. instead. That's normally how darkness works in 5e, unless you have Devil Sight. In 5e, it's one of those spells where if you need it, you really need it. It's a defense against enemy advantage itself, be it pack tactics or flanking. And it also stops spells that rely on sight. Anyways, an enemy being unseen doesn't necessarily mean you don't know where they are. A lot of people play this wrong in 5e. It's called Battleship Invisibility. A creature in 5e first needs to hide for this to be the case. In Baldur's Gate, creatures can't make ranged attacks into or out of darkness spell effects. And melee attacks onto creatures within have advantage. This is super strong. Even if you're in the open, the battlefield is against you, you can basically use it as full cover if the enemy cannot get into melee with you. It's basically like an emergency rope trick now. Invisibility, on the other hand, follows the Battleship Invisibility rule, and you somehow need to find the enemy to shoot them. A way to do this is to try to move where you think they are, which the game will not allow you to do. Number 3, spellcasting. One important thing is that components for spells don't ever require you to have an empty hand. This means you don't need something like Warcaster to cast spells while having your hands full. Other important changes include the removal of some of the crazy spells like Conjure Animals, or the nerfs to control spells like Hypnotic Pattern and Sleep. Those two spells don't last very long in Baldur's Gate. In D&D 5e, they're king spells. The list of changes is too big for this video. I might make a video about the best spells in Baldur's Gate in the future. As a final note, while in 5e you cannot cast a level 1 spell or higher as your action and bonus action, you can in Baldur's Gate. That's actually thrown me off a few times. Number 2, shields. In Baldur's Gate 3, you have two loadouts, a ranged one and a melee one. Your melee one includes weapons, including shields. Your ranged one includes ranged weapons only. If you have a shield in your melee loadouts but use your ranged loadouts, that shield AC is still added. I think that's stupid, but I'm gonna take advantage of it. You can use two-handed ranged weapons and still have that +2 AC. Funnily enough, melee characters can't put on a shield in their ranged loadouts to enjoy the +2 AC while using two-handed melee weapons. Number 1! Crossbow Expert is dead. But instead of this being a bad thing, it basically means everyone gets a feat at level 1. But Kobold, that makes no sense! Let me explain. They changed hand crossbows to give you a bonus action attack with your offhand hand crossbow if you wield two hand crossbows. Anyone can do this, by the way. You don't even need proficiency. Additionally, and this is like massive for D&D players, you don't need to have done an action attack with a hand crossbow or anything. You can just start with the bonus action attack right out of the gates, or just cast a spell as your action beforehand. You should get a hand crossbow for everyone. It's super duper useful to have a bonus action attack for all of your party members. It's basically an extra attack. Even if you don't have proficiency in it, just get it. It's so good. That's the top 10 must-know changes. If you want to see me and my friends play Baldur's Gate like it's a D&D session, link in the description. If you want to see more content like this, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye!